So I thought I'd make a quick video on dyeing bucktails. I've had them drying up for a couple weeks now and they are ready to get dyed. They've been sitting in a borax salt solution previously over there where I had my bucket of borax, and now the ones that I'm ready to dye today are sitting in this bucket of warm soapy water. I've had them in there for about 20-30 minutes. It's a good idea generally to keep them in the water a little bit before you start the actual dyeing process, getting the fibers wet and getting some soap in them. Soap helps remove the oils, and the water soaking into the fibers helps the hair accept the dye a little bit better. So they're in there, and then that's just chilling. And now I'm going to be using grit dye. You can get it in the liquid or you can get powder. The powder is cheaper, and both of them are pretty easy to work with. The liquid, at least in stores, they have a few more colors available. Eggplant, they didn't have that in the dry dye, the powder. But you got some oranges, some yellows, and today I'm going to be doing black and orange is the attempt. So I've got 4 quarts of water, and I'm going to add white vinegar, a quarter cup, and then some Dawn dish soap. It only takes a couple teaspoons in this dye solution, and that also helps remove any oils in there and helps the dye absorb better into the material. Once this gets up to temperature, we want it to be about 140. It's at 130 right now. So my pot is at 140 and it's holding. So you want to keep the grit dye, it says 140 or greater right there. You want to keep the bucktails at right at 140. The higher the temperature, the greater the chance that you'll denature the proteins in the hair, and it won't flare like it's supposed to when you tie it onto the hook. And it could break more easily, and in general it's just not good to overheat the hair. So you want to keep it right at 140. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this dye, I'm going to mix up my colors for orange. I'm probably going to try some tangerine, mix in a little bit of yellow, maybe a touch of red so I can get a nice golden orange. And the acid, the vinegar, grit is an acid dye, so the vinegar in there will help the dye adhere and set into the hair as well. So the soap is to get any residual oils or fats out of the hair, and then the vinegar is to help the dye actually set, since it's an acid dye. So I'm going to mix that up, and then once I'm done mixing it, I found a great way to test the dye is to just take the corner of a paper towel, dip it in. You can see what color your dye actually is. It doesn't work as well to use the hair of whatever you're trying to dye, because the hair doesn't absorb the dye as quickly as a paper towel will. So you want to just take the paper towel and dip it in there. You can tell really quick if it's the color you want it to be. If it's the wrong color, you can add a little bit more of a different color dye to get it to change. Generally, you start with your lighter colors. So your yellow would be the color you start with. If you're going to do an orange, start with yellow, then add your orange, and then to darken it a little bit, if you want it darker, you can add a red. To lighten it up a little bit, you can add a yellow. But once you add a dark color, it's not gonna really lighten up a lot. So start with your lighter color and then work towards darker. And that color rule applies for blues and greens. It applies for tans and browns. So if you have a tan dye and you want it to darken up a little bit, add a little touch of brown. You can add a little black. You can add a little olive. To get olive, you kind of do a tan and a brown. So you can do a lot of different things. It's pretty fun. I'll show you some that I already dyed up. I did a really cool, with the eggplant, I did a really cool purple. And it turned out really nice. And then I also did I used this pink, and I added a touch of this yellow and pink, and it came out with a really cool pink color. And then I did I used my pink and yellow solution, and then I just added in some of this scarlet, and it came out as a really cool, like, pink red, very deep pink color, kind of what I imagine this wine color would actually look like. So that looked really cool. So I'll show you what that looks like, and then just double check this pot's at 140. 145. 145 is fine. My stove isn't quite precise enough to keep it at exactly 140. All right, so I added a little bit of this lemon yellow splash. I didn't measure it. A decent amount. Some. Do whatever you want. And then I added tangerine. I did 2 teaspoons of that. And then this is the color that it is. I did a teaspoon originally of the tangerine, then I added another teaspoon because I thought it looked too light, but that looks like a pretty sweet orange to me. So I think I'm gonna call it good on the dye color there, and I'm gonna throw the bucktails in. Then the trick is to just stir it around a bunch, and it'll take a while for this dye to actually absorb fully in there. And you can see already that it's got some in there, but the tips of this hair absorbs the dye much faster than the base of the material does. And that's because the tips are much thinner and the bases are a lot thicker. So you just pretty much let it sit in there and cook until you're good with the color. You can pull it out whenever, and you can get kind of a cool effect where the tips are really a really bright color and then the bases are really light color. But the longer you let it sit in there, the darker it'll get. So I'm going to pop my other 2 in there, and I'll let them cook for a while, and then I'll show you the rinsing process. All right, so this has been going for probably 20 minutes now. I'm going to pull one out of here, show you what it looks like. It's got a pretty sweet orange color. You can see some of these fibers, as they're closer to the tail, are not quite dyed as much. They're a little bit lighter. This batch I am going to actually use as my base for the black. From what I've read online, black dye is the worst and most difficult to get to work because probably of the most pigment that needs to absorb into the fibers. And as you cook the hair for a longer period of time, you have a greater chance of burning it and denaturing the fibers in there, which makes it really stiff, really tough to work with, and overall difficult. So what I've read that people do is that they dye it a particular color first, and I've read orange is a color that people use. It might not matter what color you do. We'll find out today, I guess. What we're gonna do is just let this orange get very orange. Let the orange get very orange, and then take it out and rinse it, and this is gonna become the black once we actually go for it. So it's getting, I think it looks really cool, even like this. So as you can see, I'm done here with the orange bucktail, and it looks really cool. And now I'm just going to do the rinsing process, which is very simple. All you do is you set the water on your sink as cold as you possibly can, and you just dunk the bucktails in, and usually a stainless steel bowl works really well. I put them in a stainless steel bowl, rinse them under the cold water until there is no more dye leaching out. You can see in a second here that there's a bunch of orange dye in the water. Once your water is clear, that's when you stop rinsing with the cold. And once I'm done rinsing in cold water, then I will do the same process in a lukewarm water. That gets a little bit more of the dye out. And it's nice to do a second rinse because when you're working with the bucktail, if you don't do a second rinse, you can sometimes get dye on your hands.
I will just set this bucket in the sink and then just let the water run over it, and then I go out and I work on other things, and then I'll come back in and dump the water out and let it fill up again. Also, if you spray your sink out with water before you actually start doing your rinse process, it probably would prevent you from having dye stain your sink, or at least it would be a little bit better at it. So those are some notes on the rinsing process. Overall, it's pretty simple, and then you get to see what your final bucktail looks like, and it's really cool.
All right, so I've done 5 tails that are this same orange color, and what I did was after I did the first batch of 3, I added in a little bit more dye, and then I just dropped the same tails in, or dropped the next 2 tails in, excuse me. And now on this last one, we'll see how this turns out, but I just added a splash of brown because I kind of thought it'd be kind of cool to do the same color, but add a little bit of brown and get just kind of an off orange, dirty orange. Let's see how that turns out. So I don't know how I feel about it yet, but probably as the dye absorbs into the material, it'll look a little bit better, and maybe it'll look good right now. We'll see. Yeah, it looks okay. Looks kind of weird, tan, but we'll let it go a little bit longer. All right, so this one's been going for a little bit. It was looking more brown than I wanted it to, so I just took some of my tangerine powder from over there, and I added a little bit more, and then I added a little bit more of the lemon yellow dye to brighten it up a little bit, and I think it worked, and it seems like now it's kind of coming together as a nice burnt orange. All right, so I just took my 3 orange bucktails that I decided to use for black, and I just dumped them in the pot. So I did the Rit black dye, and we're gonna see how it turns out. So I've got the black going. I did the orange base. So far I added a full bottle of this, and I added almost half a box of the powdered dye. So there's a lot of black in there. Added a little bit of the eggplant, a little bit of brown. We'll see if it was a mistake adding either of those, or if I should have just done all black. Right now, it's kind of starting to look pretty black. Just kind of let it go for a long time, I think, is what I've read, is that it just takes a long time for black to fully absorb into bucktail to get it to be the color you want. Here's kind of the test swatch I did, and it looks pretty black, so I'm pretty happy with that. All right, so I've had the black concoction going for the bucktail for probably 45 minutes to an hour now. And let me pull one out and show you what it looks like. Here's where we're at on that. That's about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It's getting pretty close to black. Right now it's kind of like a very dark gray or an olive almost, so I think if I were to wash it out, it wouldn't look like what I want it to look like. But I think if I keep going with it, it'll probably end up right about where I want it to be. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep it cooking. There is so much black dye in this bath, and it's been going for so much longer than any of the other ones that I've done. My orange ones were probably done in 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. We're still at about an hour on this, I'd say.
It took 3 hours, but the black bucktail turned out awesome.
So I got done with the black bucktail. That's all finished up, and it turned out really, really nice. So I did that test to see if, well, I did these ones with orange. I did orange first, this color, which turned out really, really cool. Liking that a lot. And then I dyed it black. And I'd heard that you need to dye it orange first. And then I took this little chunk that was just a natural piece of white bucktail, normal, just to cut off, I think, the tip of a different piece, so it was scrap. And I threw this in there with the black. I didn't dye this one orange first, it was just white. It came out looking really black. So that extra time to dye the bucktail orange first, I don't really think it's worth it, because you can see it looks almost identical. Yeah, I don't think it's worth it. So anyways, here's all the colors I have. I did black, some purple, did this cool, I don't know, I call it rare steak, I guess is what it kind of looks like. And then I've got medium steak, or I don't know, pink. And then got a cool looking tan, and my orange I did today. And then this, it kind of looks like a ginger, almost like a like brown orange, I don't know. And my black. Between me cutting all these up, drying them in borax, washing them when you initially cut them up, you want to wash them really well, and then going through this whole dyeing process, I have probably more time into it than it's worth it. So if you were doing them in massive bulk quantities, you probably would save money. I've got about 12 tails here, and they're about $12 to $14 on Musky Fool, which is a great company. They sell a lot of awesome stuff and are very helpful. They've helped me with some glider information in the past, and they're pretty responsive on Facebook or Instagram. But you could buy them there for about $13 average, and this probably took me, I'd say 15 hours total for all of these, so quite a bit less than minimum wage. So if you just picked up an odd job and bought bucktails from Musky Fool, you would probably have more bucktails than I do right now. But otherwise, if you are looking to make some fun custom colors and you want to get hands-on, it's a pretty cool process. You get to turn something that was just a dead material that was going to go to waste, and you get to turn it into your own unique fly tying material, which is pretty cool. So pretty fun process, and that's it.